This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss, co-host of PBS's Motor Week. He'll take your calls and comments now at 844-885-4677 or email him at radio@goss-garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Goss's Garage. Hey, you know, owning a car these days is, well, not easy. There's always something new or different to worry about. One of the current hot-button topics is big brake systems. No, not the high-end systems used to modify cars for track day, but low-end kits, often promoted when you have your brakes replaced. Your late-model Belch-Fryer Limited needs brakes, so like most drivers, you look for the cheapest price in town and find a low price at a brake specialty shop. Brakes by lowest bidder? Oh my God. Well, anyway, their ad says they will do 2 front or 2 rear wheels for $89. So you're out the door. But what you don't know is this is a come-on price to get you into their shop. You also don't know that it's very unlikely you will leave with an $89 final bill. Now, your final bill will be much higher depending on your sales resistance or lack thereof. You see, this is a brake sales game designed to sell you more parts or more expensive parts than are included in the basic $89 job. First, they raise your car and remove its wheels so you can't leave. After a couple of classy-looking fake tests, they begin their sales pitch. First, they inform you that the brake pads in the ad are not really intended for use on your Belch-Fryer Limited. They actually work best on small economy cars. Your bigger car should have the mid-price brake job, which increases the price by about $100. Then they tell you your brake rotors can't be machined, so they must be replaced. Another $150. And finally, they hit you with their knockout punch. Sir, do you have children? Well, yes, I do. Why? I noticed the baby seat in the back and thought you should know that we have a truly remarkable upgrade for your brakes that will make your car stop much better and make it a lot safer. Now, we can add our exclusive big brake kit for just an additional $1,200. For that, we'll add bigger brake rotors and bigger brake pads. Think about it. Everyone knows that bigger rotors increase braking leverage, and that makes the car stop in less distance, which makes it safer. I know that's a lot of money, but we can put the entire job on an easy payment plan that makes it very painless on the old wallet. Then comes a demo to explain how big brakes work, and all of it will be true except they leave out one important part. Brakes can only apply as much stopping force as the tires can generate traction. In other words, if your stock brakes can apply enough stopping leverage to lock up the tires and make them lose their grip, it doesn't matter how much more stopping leverage you give the brakes, the tires will lose their grip at the same level of deceleration. Double the braking action and get 0 decrease in stopping distance because bigger brakes don't make the tires grip the road any better. So, it's the tires, not the brakes, that really alter the stopping distance. True, the bigger brakes may hold up better in repeated stops, such as on the racetrack, but unless you're going to the track, you will never gain a benefit from the bigger brakes. For better braking on the street, concentrate on your tires first, then upgrade the brakes to match your upgraded tires. More brakes than your tires can handle is a waste of money. And just something that you should know. All right, folks, we are joined once more by our good friend Rick Robinson of American High Performance in Lorton, Virginia. Rick, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be back, Pat.
All right. Big brakes, very good. Love them when they're done right.
Absolutely. One of the things we advise our customers when they want more horsepower and more speed out of their vehicle is you still have to stop this thing. And if you're stopping it, as you said, on the same set of brakes and the same tires that you had before, you're likely to get yourself in trouble because of the higher speed that you can achieve with your newfound horsepower.
Right.
And they'll always upgrade the rear tires to get more traction because with more horsepower, it just goes up in smoke if you don't do something with the rear tires. But they forget about the front tires. And a good 60–70% of your braking comes from the front wheels as opposed to the back because the weight shifts to the front. And it's in this area you get what you pay for. If you want it just for looks, for the car show, you want a big rotor in there, a nice painted caliper, fine, spend your money on it, but don't expect an improvement in performance unless you upgrade the rotor gives you that wider diameter, better lever arm, better stopping power, but using the same caliper with a larger pad is not going to change things because it's still applying the pressure in the same point on that pad. The outer
and the same amount of pressure too.
And the outer ends are just sitting out there, going along for the ride.
Right.
The ones that we sell primarily are the larger 4 and 6 piston calipers that spread that load out across that entire big pad. And with the right tire on it, as you said, they'll darn near put you through the windshield.
Oh yeah.
When you step on them.
Yeah, I get some cars in here that have been done up right, and you take them out and drive them, and literally, I mean, it feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head with the way they stop, and it's pretty amazing. Yet we see some of these, I don't know, El Cheapo things that get sold in some of the shops and so on, or do-it-yourselfers, and there's just really nothing there.
Yeah. We've talked about road racing before, that the key to winning a road race is not so much power. Yes, you have to have power to get the speed to keep up with everybody, but where you win a race is in the turns. And there's 2 factors there. And the first one is how long can I wait as I come into the turn before I trump on the brakes, and that is all due to what kind of braking power you have on the car.
Now you mentioned multi-piston calipers. What are, I know you spread the force out and things like that, but what are the main advantages to multi-piston over single piston?
That's primarily it, that you're spreading the force out across 6 pistons instead of the one that your typical stock brake will come with. Because you've got the same amount of pressure coming from your master cylinder, because you're not changing that. Your leg can only give you so much, even with power brakes. But when you spread it out over a larger area, you get a greater force applied to the brake. If you put one big piston in there, again, you're only going to apply it right to the center of the pad, and the outer ends of the pad are not doing any work for you. The 6 piston will spread it out across the entire length of the pad. And they typically come in a graduated size too, because as the rotor is moving through the pad, it tends to pull the back end of the pad in towards the rotor more than the front end. So to try to keep even pressure across it, you'll notice that the rear cylinder piston is smaller than the front piston. They're graduated in size that way, so that you're applying more pressure to the front of the pad than you are the back to try to keep the force even across them.
So you're taking advantage of the laws of physics.
Absolutely.
Any problem with multi-piston calipers these days in balance?
I have not seen any. We haven't experienced any of that. No.
You know, back in the day, the first ones that we had any real experience with were the old Corvettes with the 4-piston calipers. They were fixed calipers, and it was always a problem keeping the pressure balanced between the inside and the outside, and you know, there's just no end of problems with them. They were a pretty good braking system, but you had to know exactly how to dial everything in to get them to work the way they really should.
Mm-hmm. And one thing about the newer ones, you'll notice that the rotors are massive, you know, much bigger than what you had on there originally. Stock brakes are typically a single piston brake. There's one piston on the inside of the caliper. The outside is just a clamp out there that holds the pad in place, and it pushes the pads, you know, because it's a floating caliper, it pushes itself against the rotor and clamps it in between the two. But the main pressure is coming from that one piston on the inside. If the calipers are a little dirty and sticky, you know, you may not get the same pressure on the inside pad as the outside pad.
You see it all the time.
Whereas the newer brakes, the 6-piston, as we call them, they're called that because there's 3 on the outside and 3 on the inside. You get 6 independent pistons pushing against
And the
that.
caliper is fixed. The caliper doesn't move.
Right.
So, and that's one of the big things. We find people that don't service their brakes regularly. And people say, well, what am I going to service on my brakes? Well, one of the things is that we're going to clean up the slides. We're going to put a special brake grease on the slides so the caliper can slide easily. And we want to be able to see them where we can just take our thumbs and move them back and forth if they're working right. Collapse the piston and you can just slide the caliper back and forth. We get them all the time where the inner pad is just gone, or sometimes the outer pad is gone because the outside sticks and won't release. And,
and it's dragging against the rotor all the time.
Yeah. So we find that routine brake service, and we recommend every 12,000 miles or once a year, makes all the difference in how the brakes perform and how long they last.
And again, that's where the get what you pay for theory comes in, is that the guy who's going to do your brake job for you for $59.95 is not going to spend the time to do that. He's going to pop that caliper off, throw a new set of pads in, back on the car and out the door.
Right, and that's what we call a pad slap. And that's what it amounts to. Because other things that we do is we take a flat file, and there'll be rust and stuff that builds up in the slides. And you take a flat file without removing any metal. You just very gently clean up any rust or corrosion or anything where the caliper slides, both on the caliper and in the bracket, and makes for a much better brake job. So anyway, folks, hey, we need to take a quick break. Rick Robinson from American High Performance in Lorton, Virginia is back for the whole show, and we're going to talk about some modifications when we come back.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Never drive with a bad attitude. I know that's hard with so many stupid, distracted, aggressive, and just plain rude drivers on the road, but it really is the safe thing to do. I drive a lot, and I used to see reckless, rude, or aggressive drivers maybe once a month. But today, it seems like every other driver is doing something stupid. When it was sporadic, it wasn't so hard to deal with, but now it seems like there's always an idiot 3 feet from my rear bumper or weaving into my lane or cutting me off. Distracted? Probably. Dangerous? Absolutely. But there's nothing to do except drive defensively and not aggravate other drivers. Much as I'd like to, I don't middle finger the offending driver. and definitely don't hit my brakes to scare a tailgater. Initially, these situations may be simple mistakes, but an aggressive response to a mistake can escalate it into a personal confrontation, which can easily turn into road rage. Unfortunately, you have no idea which one of these idiots will try to hurt you with their car, a weapon, or their fists. Also, never make direct eye contact with the offending driver. If you're the offender, be courteous and get out of the way. Whether it's a mistake or intentional aggression, remember, back down, yield, let it go. It takes brains to overcome anger. Use your brain. Be smart. Life changes at a ferocious pace these days, especially when it comes to maintaining our cars. For example, automatic transmissions now need regular fluid flushes. Transmission fluid breaks down with use, and although it may look fine, its additives wear out and it can no longer properly protect bands, clutches, seals, and other hugely expensive parts inside your transmission. Bottom line, more wear and a shorter transmission life. Now you can significantly extend transmission life with a BG transmission flush every 24 to 30,000 miles or 2 years. BG makes the best transmission flush machine I've ever tested. It renews all of the fluid in your transmission, not just a small part of it. The BG transmission flush machine is safe too, because it uses the natural circulation of the transmission. Your transmission will work better and last longer. As with everything BG offers, this is a superior service. For more information, go to bgprod.com or bgfindashop.com.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
For those enjoying Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new showtime every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, and we do repeat the show at the old 1 o'clock hour, so if you want to listen in at 1, go ahead, you just can't call in. Speaking of calls, we have Jim from Pennsylvania. Jim, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Good to be back, Pat. I've got a service engine code, and it's P052B. It says that it's a old start camshaft. I'm over retarded.
Right.
Can you just decipher that a little bit for us?
Well, you've got a cam position sensor, and obviously your car has variable valve timing. And what it's telling you is that when the car starts up, that the valves are in a retarded position, too far retarded, or the camshaft is, for proper operation at a given temperature. Now, that may mean that there is a problem in the cam actuating system, which relies on oil pressure. So if you have the wrong oil or you have dirty oil or something like that, it can set this code. Or it could mean that there is a problem in the sensor or the trigger mechanism for the sensor where it isn't reading these things properly. So that's why you take that code, and for that code there is going to be a test sequence with exactly the same number, and you run that test sequence to see which one of the possible causes of the code is what's going on.
Now, will the computer turn off that code if over time the issue is resolved by itself?
Yes. It has to see 2 complete drive cycles with no existing problem, and the drive cycles have to be sequential, and it has to see no problems whatsoever in that area before it will erase the code and turn off the light. Not likely, but once in a great while it does happen.
That appears to be what happened was the computer itself turned the light off. What happened was the car was driven in heavy rain for about 4 hours on a road trip.
Mm-hmm.
And the car was after that parked. And about an hour later, went out and started it. And that's when the code came on. Now, after a couple days, after things had dried out, the light was off.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that perhaps the connector that's probably on the outside of the engine, and if it's the camshaft one, it's probably low, and maybe the connection got wet, and the computer was reading a little bit voltages that were off coming from the sensor through the connector. That's
Jim?
my working theory, but as you said,
Jim,
you gotta go through the test procedure.
you're very astute, because that was exactly where I was going to point you, that it was probably moisture in that connector at the cam sensor.
Okay, great. So at this point, I mean, the light is out, everything's okay. Should we go in there and open up that connector, put some contact cleaner in or contact enhancer and put it back together?
I would put contact enhancer and dielectric grease in the connector.
Okay. Any cleaners that you use on the pins and all on the inside the connector?
Well,
first?
the contact enhancer is actually a cleaner.
Okay.
So contact
All right,
enhancer
well,
and then dielectric grease, and you should be good to go.
all right, great.
Okay?
Thanks so much, Pat.
All right.
Yes, sir.
And one thing I'd point out to our listeners, Pat, is, and it's probably not applicable to this situation, but just in general, that it's important to maintain the factory recommended oil in cars with variable valve timing, because they can be very sensitive to oil viscosity.
Yeah, they all work on oil pressure, and when you change viscosity, that either raises or lowers oil pressure, and we get Hondas all the time that come in and somebody has told them to put 1040 or 2050 in it instead of the 020 or 520, and they got a check engine light, and they got a cam sensor code, and you know, you ask them about their oil and so, oh well, it's got to protect the engine and all this stuff. Well, what's happened is it's the thicker oil has pushed the oil pressure up, and now it's seeing an improper amount of valve timing.
And the other system that's in many cars today is it goes by different names, but basically active fuel management or displacement on demand. It's the ability to turn 4 cylinders of a V8 off and be running, in cruise on 4 cylinders and get better economy. Again, that's operated by oil pressure and the lifters. Those 4 cylinders have a lifter of specific design that can basically release the pressure and let the lifter go flat, so those valves don't open. But again, sensitive to the right type of oil viscosity.
One of the things we've seen with variable displacement is that people go to a thicker oil, and when the V8 goes into 4-cylinder mode, they have to keep that lifter lubricated. And so there's a small amount of oil flow to it, even though it is collapsed. And the thicker oil doesn't allow enough to go through that lifter, and the lifter eats itself alive.
See a lot of issues with the Chevys and the active fuel management in those, and lifter failure.
Yeah, that's the primary one that we see it on, and invariably we find that somebody has used a thicker than recommended oil, or that the vehicle has been used for a lot of highway driving, where they set the cruise control and it never goes into the 8-cylinder mode, and the lifter never pumps up and stuff like that. So, but great technology, but like all great things, there are some downsides to it. And one of the big things is read and follow label directions, for crying out loud.
Read the directions. Real men don't do that, but...
Oh, goodness. Rick, you specialize in high performance. And a lot of people seem to think that the only thing that you do are the late models, but you do the older cars too.
That is a misconception, and we do a lot of work in the classics. In some cases, people are bringing the cars to us to upgrade, get better performance out of them. But in many cases, they're trying to maintain the originality of the car, but they want somebody to maintain them, that really knows the cars well, and will do it right, and not give them the cheapo maintenance that we talked about earlier. And one part of the old classics that has become difficult to find, particularly at your general maintenance shops, is people who understand what a carburetor is.
Yeah, I know most of my younger techs have never worked on a carburetor, may have never seen one.
Yeah, that old school technology, it's getting harder and harder to find old guys like myself, that still remember what they are and how to fix them.
Well, they call me in when they get a carburetor. They usually call me in to do the setup on the carburetor, jet it, or whatever needs to be done, and do the adjustments and so on.
Yeah, and we do a lot of classic work now, and it's an increasing part of our business, again, because customers are recognizing that we have the skills to be able to maintain the cars properly. We've got a really nice 68 Mustang Coupe in the shop right now, pretty car. And he brought it into us because it just wouldn't run right. Now, one of the things that you can do with these cars today, if you're tired of the issues that you have with carburetors, and is finally, as you can tune those things, you're still going to have some issues in winter around here if you drive the car in winter. Cold starts in a carbureted car were always a problem. And if you pump it too much to try to get going, then you're going to flood the thing, and now you're sitting there, cranking and cranking, trying to get it clear. But the technology on the market today allows us to replace that carburetor with what's called a throttle body. It looks just like a force barrel carburetor. If you have the pictures up, you can see that when you pop the hood and look at it, it looks just like it originally did. Air cleaner there, everything looks normal. Take that air cleaner off, and underneath it is this 4-barrel throttle body with fuel injectors built into it. Of course, it takes a computer to run those, so now we're adding a computer to your car, but we give you the reliability of electronic fuel injection and the classic look of the old school carburetor cars.
And that's something for years that we've been doing here, moving older cars to electronics. We started out with the ignition systems and so on, get rid of points which were horrifically unreliable, and the old condenser that would short out and you were dead in the water, and all of these other issues. And that science has progressed immensely over the years for the older cars.
And that's generally the first upgrade we'll do to any classic car that comes into us, is replace the points with the electronic module. It's a very simple, easy replacement. Parts aren't that expensive, and it just takes that problem of the points away, and your ignition is going to perform infinitely better.
Yeah, I can remember when we used to go to the track with cars with points, you'd make a run, and then you'd have to dial in the points and so on. It was that critical to performance that after every run, you recheck the dwell and everything on the points.
Yeah, and how many techs still or even know what a dwell meter is, right?
Exactly. So first thing for you, just like it is for us, is to convert to electronics.
Yeah. It's invisible, it's inside the distributor, nobody can see it's there. If you're worried about maintaining originality, nobody knows it's in there, and it just really helps the car.
And when it comes to things like fuel injection, the difference in reliability and performance is just immense.
Absolutely. carburetors, it basically work on averages. You know, it's you've got a jet in there that's going to give you good performance over the whole range of engine RPM and torque. But what electronic fuel injection does is allow us to optimize it. When we go into the tables and we dial in a fuel-injected car, we're looking at every 100 RPM increment from generally starting with about 2,000, 2,500 RPM, because that's where it starts to really load up and you're going into wide open throttle. And we dial it in all the way up to its maximum RPM. And optimizing your power all the way through that range. And that's how we can get 800 horsepower out of a factory engine and still drive it down the road every day, and you know, starts up just fine. And
well, you know, the other thing that people don't realize the difference, because some people say, oh, well, I want to stay with a carburetor. They don't realize that in a carburetor, the fuel is drawn in by air movement. So we have to open the throttle, get air movement, and then the fuel comes later. Where with fuel injection, it's an instantaneous thing. As soon as we depress the accelerator, we have a change in fuel delivery.
Yep, absolutely. And it's using the O2 sensor to monitor the amount of fuel that the car is getting and keep it optimized at the level you want it at throughout the range of power. And one thing we advise customers who want to stick with the carburetor, they want to maintain that originality, but they want more power, so let's go bigger. You know, I've got a 600 CFM carburetor on there. Give me an 850. That'll give me a whole lot more power.
Right.
No, it doesn't quite work that way, because when you throw those butterflies open in an 850 carburetor on a little 289 motor or a 302 even. All of that velocity that's going through those venturis and sucking that gas in just goes away. Your vacuum goes away, the velocity goes away, and it just bogs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wasn't too long ago we had an older Mustang in here that somebody had put this giant carburetor on it, and it was all right if you drove it normally, but you flog it, bleh, just fall right on its face.
Yeah. When you finally get it up to about 4,000 RPM or so, it'll start to work for you. But driving it around, it's going to be miserable.
Oh, it certainly was. All right, we need to take a break. We will be right back with Rick Robinson from American High Performance in Morton. We're also going to talk to John from Front Royal, Virginia, coming up here on Goss's Garage.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
I get lots of air filter questions, and one of the most common deals with why air filters need to be replaced so often. Well, actually, they usually don't, yet many drivers wind up buying a new air filter at every oil change, which is utterly ridiculous. Drivers say techs tell them if they don't buy a new air filter, they'll waste a lot of gas. Maybe that statement comes from ignorance or maybe dishonesty, but either way, you lose. Decades ago, dirty air filters did waste gas, but today, not so much. Cars now use a sensor to measure the air coming through the air filter, and computers to mix exactly the right amount of gas to match that air. So even though a dirty air filter reduces airflow into the engine, it doesn't affect gas mileage because the computer is always precisely matching fuel to the incoming air. In other words, a dirty filter means less air, and less air means less gas, so there's never an imbalance between air and fuel. Certainly when a filter gets really, really dirty, it can cause performance problems, but even then it may not affect gas mileage. So how long do air filters last? Unless you drive in really dusty conditions, air filters usually last 30 to 60,000 miles. Overselling of air filters is an enormous problem, and the best way not to be taken is to learn how to check your own air filter and check it twice a year. I get lots of questions about BG products, many about specific products or services like, is BG44K really that good, or our BG transmission cooling system and power steering flushes actually necessary. But most popular of all, do I use BG products in my cars? Well, the answer to all of those questions is yes. A regular schedule of BG flushes and chemicals will deliver the longest possible life from all the lubricated and fuel delivery parts on your vehicles. And do I use BG products? You bet I do. I drive nice cars, and I drive a lot. Plus, my live radio and TV shows mean that my cars have to be absolutely reliable. A no start from dirty fuel injectors or a failed transmission just isn't acceptable in my life. Remember, deposits and dirty fluids ruin expensive parts. For reliability like I demand, visit one of the quality shops that sell BG products and perform BG services. To find a BG professional near you, bgfindashop.com.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
Hey folks, this portion of Goss's Garage, rented lips, this portion of Goss's Garage is brought to you by BG products, and yes, I sell them in my shops and I use them in my cars. No secret there. All right, let's talk to John from Front Royal, Virginia, 2004 Ford van. John, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Welcome. Yes, I have a strictly economical question. I am a delivery driver, and I make about 40 to 50 stops a day, and I'm usually in and out in about 2 minutes. Quick question is it better for my vehicle economically to idle the van and make the delivery and come back for about 2 minutes, or to turn it on and off each time about 40 or 50 times a day?
All right, well, the fact of the matter is that from a fuel standpoint, it would be more economical to shut it off, but that many starts in a day is going to make the starter and the flywheel and all of these different parts wear out a lot faster. So anything that you would save on fuel, you would many times over spend on repairing the electrical system of the vehicle.
Right. That's kind of what I was siding on. But I realized if it's a larger delivery of, say, over 5 minutes or so, then I usually do shut it down. But for the quick ones, I usually just leave it idle. And we had a big discussion about that at the warehouse with other drivers, and so I figured I'd wait till Saturday and give you a call.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, we listen all the time. Really enjoy it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
It would be interesting to see the statistics on these new hybrid vehicles that shut themselves off every time you come to a stop and then restart to see if it's impacting their reliability.
Not just hybrids. My new Jeep has it. Fortunately, it has a button that I can push to turn that miserable sucker up. Oh, I hate that. And you know, I've tried it both ways, and I can't see a measurable difference in fuel economy.
I wouldn't think so. For the short time that you're going to be stopped, you know, when you start the car, again, fuel injection says, I got to get this thing going, so I got to give it a bigger shot of gas initially to get it up and running. And normally on cold starts, it's going to enrichen it, the mixture until it heats up. Now, you're already hot, so that doesn't come in for as long a period, but it's still there initially. And I would imagine it would offset the fuel mileage.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, you know, maybe they're looking at it on a national basis or something, and maybe for each individual driver it's a thousandth of a mile to the gallon or something that we can't see, but you make it cumulative, and these millions of cars, it saves a lot of gas. But for individuals, I can't see any difference, other than the fact that it annoys me.
There's always that little delay as you step on the pedal, right?
Yeah, take your foot off the brake and starter goes and engine starts, and then you push on the gas and hey, all of this worked. And I just wonder which time it's not going to work and I'm going to get creamed by a semi. All right. Hey, we have Ken from Laurel on the line. Ken, welcome to Goss's Garage.
How you doing, Pat? Welcome, Pat. Last week you did answer my email about whether you should depress the clutch and leave it in neutral or leave it in gear.
Right.
On the manual transmission.
Right.
Right, and I agree with you about the safety aspect. It's better to keep it in gear if you're at a light.
Okay.
But the only thing I question is, does it really matter that much whether you put the wear on the input shaft bearing or the throw-out bearing?
Oh, I would much rather you put the wear on the input bearing, because ultimately it's going to wear out and you're going to come to me and I'm going to charge you 10 to 20 times as much as I am to replace a release bearing.
Right, but doesn't that input shaft bearing get a lot of wear normally because the clutch is in the up position?
Well,
on normal driving.
Yes, it does, but why add to it?
Yeah, I just thought it would be better well made to handle that because it's up all the time.
Well, sure, it is better well made and so on. But the fact of the matter is that when you can minimize the wear on an expensive part, why not do it?
Right, even if it's just for such a short period of time.
Yeah, and the other thing is that it isn't just the input bearing. There is an input shaft and an output shaft, and between the two shafts, there is a small, little teeny, usually a roller bearing that's mounted in a cage in there. And because the input shaft is turning and the output shaft isn't turning, you're adding wear to that center bearing.
Right. Okay, I was just curious about that because I know the clutch is in the up position 99% of the time when you drive.
Yep.
So it is getting wear, but...
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. All right. And for what we were talking about there, he had emailed me and wanted to know about putting the car in neutral at a traffic light and letting the clutch up, which of course is going to have the clutch engaged and the input shaft turning and all of these other things. And my advice has always been, there's been a number of studies to back it up, that keep it in gear, number one, for safety. If something's coming at you, you can very quickly get out of the way. And number two, because of the added wear to the transmission, because when the clutch is engaged, the front part of the transmission is spinning.
Mm-hmm. And you get better exercise on your leg.
Right.
And as little exercise as we get these days, that's important.
Stronger left leg. That is a very good point. What are some of the other things that you do as far as the classic cars are concerned? How do you get, and how much horsepower can you get out of some of these antique engines?
Again, if you stick with the original technology, you can get quite a bit of horsepower. Small blocks, you can typically get up in the mid 400 range without too much difficulty. You can take them further if they're built properly, but generally going to need a power adder, either nitrous or superchargers or something like that. You got to get the oxygen in there to burn with the fuel.
Right.
The big blocks, 600 horsepower or better with a big block motor, but you're really pushing the capability of those of that old technology to get there. One of the things that we encounter a lot with the older ones, of course, is the engines are just worn, and it's always a debate: do I rebuild this one, or do I get a replacement engine? Whether I'm replacing it with an original stock motor or whether I'm upgrading to a better motor in the process. or do I want to maintain the originality and have that original motor rebuilt? And you balance the price between the two. Typically, we can do a stock rebuild cheaper than you can go out and buy a replacement engine. But boy, if the internet helped anything in this business, it's really helped the crate motor business. Back in the day, you were limited to how many machine shops were in your local area that you could take your motor to and get something done, right? Or go find a less worn out engine in the junkyard. Today, with the internet, it's not just a national market; it's a world market, and of course, you got to be careful where these motors are coming from because of that. But there's just a lot of crate motor suppliers out there, and you have to be careful. You go back to that "get what you pay for" theory, and if the price is cheaper than the other guy, it's because he's building it cheaper. He's putting cheaper parts in there. You're essentially going to get stock internals, even though he says this is a 360 or 400 horsepower small block Chevy, and it very likely will do that on an engine dyno.
Yeah, but for how long?
For how long? Yeah, because it's got stock internals in it. If the price is not appropriate.
That brings up another point. If you're going to do it right, the technology in crankshafts and camshafts and so on has gone by light years ahead in a modern engine. That's something I presume that you have to apply to the older engine if you're really going to do it right?
Yes, absolutely. And particularly with camshaft changes, you can't just throw a cam in there and expect that everything's going to be fine, because it depends on how big that cam is, as we say, what the profile of the cam is. You're probably going to have to do a spring upgrade, maybe lifters and everything. If it's an older motor, those lifters are worn, and they're not going to maintain their pressure and the lift that you're going to get if they're pushing against a real heavy spring that's appropriate for that cam. The bigger the lobe on the cam and the steeper the slope on that lobe, the heavier spring you have to have in order to prevent valve float. Because this is just laws of inertia again, physics comes into play. At 4,000 to 6,000 RPM, you're flinging that valve up and down pretty fast. And if you don't have a good strong spring to account for the rapid opening and the increased lift, it's going to start to float on you. And if that valve is floating, it's staying open, and now you're losing the compression and everything else, and you're losing power at the upper end.
Yeah, it all comes down to inertia of motion, and that an object in motion wants to stay in motion, but it also wants to stay in motion in the same direction that it's moving. Mm-hmm. So springs and everything have to counteract all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a new thing that I just saw the other day, first time I'd noted it, is this. They have springs that they're putting on top of the lifter, and that are basically clamped to the push rod to try to keep essentially the push rod from coming up off the lifter, and as it gets to the top and starts going back down, to keep that all together and moving and at one piece.
I know we used to hit a point with the small blocks that no matter what you did, you reach a certain point and you over rev it, and the lift or the push rod would keep moving and jump right out of the top of the lifter, and then you were down a cylinder and didn't run all that well.
No, tend to lose a little. Well, you get active fuel management without having all of that system in there, right? Except it's all the time.
Hey folks, we've got one more quick break. More with Rick Robinson from American High Performance coming up here on Goss's Garage.
And we'll do a...
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Space Saver spare tires sure do look silly, but if you use them properly, they will get you home safely. Now, a common problem with them is low air pressure. Spares are buried in the trunk and no one ever seems to check their pressure. Plus, they typically require much higher pressure than your regular tires. Also, Space Saver spares have limits on how far and how fast you can drive on them. Bottom line, always read and follow the caution warnings on their labels and sidewalls. Oh yeah, don't be one of those poor schmucks with a flat tire and a flat spare. Check your spare once a month. While checking the spare, look at the jack handle, and the lug wrench to be sure everything is there and in working order. The best spare tire in the world is useless without the tools to put it on the car. Some cars may even require special lug nuts to mount the spare. If those special lug nuts are missing, you will have no safe way to use your spare. Don't fall victim to "it looks good, therefore it must be good." Like when thump bump you're tapped by another car at a traffic light or in a parking lot. You get out and look, and being a good person, yeah, right. You just don't want the hassle of calling the cops and your insurance company. Plus, you don't even see a scratch, so you let it go. That could be a minor to deadly mistake. What you see is purely cosmetic, but hidden behind the cosmetics are safety systems. Those hidden parts absorb and dissipate energy, and they may have been damaged in that tiny bump. The problem is that unless you have energy absorbers and crumple zones checked, they may not protect you if your car is hit again in the same spot. Most safety parts are one-time use, and that first minor bump may have used up a portion of their effectiveness. Then, in an actual accident, they're only partially effective. For instance, the energy absorber may transmit more of the crash energy into the car and the people in the car. That could mean the difference between no or minor injuries or something worse, especially for young or elderly passengers. Even in bumps that seem like a total non-issue, take a minute to exchange information, then have the safety parts behind the bumper checked. It might save a life.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
Hey folks, please subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. All right, Rick Robinson from American High Performance is here with us, and we have Bob from Michigan with a Pontiac Firebird. Bob, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Thank you, Pat. My question is with today's gasoline that is got a much lower flash point. My car's running on a carburetor, and it has the carb heat underneath. And after I get to like a car show or something like that, the engine gets a good heat soak. The gasoline will just boil right out of the carburetor. My question is how much heat do I need to to vaporize the fuel with today's gas?
Rick, that's right up your alley.
Well, the heat is really there to help get the thing warmed up quickly on a cold start. And if it's getting to the point where you're boiling the fuel out of the carburetor, you've got an issue. I would get it into a shop and have them go through the thing and figure out why that's happening. It could be that your EGR valve is stuck open and you're just pumping exhaust gas through there all the time. Any number of things, but that's not normal. Obviously, when we were driving those around in 1968 or whatever, that didn't happen every time you shut the car off. So, something that you ought to have a shop look at.
The things that we have found here, Bob, is that sometimes we find that the engine, even though it doesn't show it on the gauge, the engine is running a little hotter than what it should. Other things, we have found a lot of them that don't have the stainless steel isolation plate under the carburetor to help dissipate that, and some things like that. Those are things that I would look at.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right. Well, okay. So, yeah. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Good luck with it. Let us know how it works out. All right. You have a Chevy 2 Nova, or?
Yeah, but a young military officer that bought a '73 Nova. It was the car he liked, and since he was a kid, and he wanted one, and he bought this one. And unfortunately, what he got was a car that had been modified to be a race car. It had a big block in it, a 396. The TH400 transmission had a 9-inch forward rear end in the back with a spool, so going around corners was a lot of fun. But what he brought it in for was the engine was not running well. It was overheating, making noise. Long story short, we pulled the motor out, tore it down, so we could go through the whole thing, tell him what he's got and what his issues are. Sent the block over to the machine shop, and in doing their inspection, found it was cracked. So that's now a boat anchor and no longer of any value to him. And he didn't want to spend the money on a big block. He really just wanted a cruiser, but bought a car that wasn't a cruiser. And so we ended up going with one of the 350 small block crate motors. And you can get some real nice ones out there that have decent horsepower in that 350 to 400 range at a pretty reasonable price. And as you can see from the pictures that we're putting up, it's a nice little car, and the engine looks great in there. Put the Edelbrock intake package on it with the Endurashine coating, so you got a nice shiny bling on top of the motor.
And it stays that way.
And it stays that way. And the Edelbrock carburetors are great for working right out of the box. Tweak the idle jets just a little bit to get it dialed in, and they're good to go.
That Edelbrock carburetor, I guess they bought the rights to the old Carter carburetor that was just, an amazing piece of carburetor. Every boat in the world used it for many, many years, and it holds its settings and just was fabulous as carburetors go. Yeah.
They were built for smooth operation and reliability, and they did that very well. They didn't go so much into the big horsepower, the big carburetors like Holley did, but a great carburetor for your typical driver.
And for most people, you'd recommend the Edelbrock.
Yes.
If you're not looking for huge horsepower.
If you want just a good looking and good driving vehicle that you're going to take to car shows and just cruise around in, you can't beat it.
Yeah, okay. All right. Hey, Rick, we have just about run the clock. Any real quick bits of wisdom?
Bits of wisdom. Take your car to a reputable shop. As Pat mentioned earlier, the cheapest price is not necessarily the best investment for you. Particularly if you've got a classic car, you've got investment in something that is worth some money, maintain it well. Don't let the cheap guy at the local gas station get his hands on it, because it's probably not going to come.
Yeah, you're not going to like the results. Yeah. Rick, how can people get in touch with you?
You can reach us by phone at 703-339-7412, or you can find our brand new website at AmericanHighPerformance.com.
Okay. Rick, I want to thank you. Thanks to Steve McMillan and George Stockton for producing today's show. For everyone here at Goss's Garage, I'm Pat Goss. Until next time, please, everybody, drive gently. We'll see ya.